Picture this: a 7-month pregnant woman, alone in a grocery store just trying to buy food for her unborn child. Then her ex-boyfriend walks in, polished, arrogant, his new girlfriend on his arm, and in front of every camera, every shopper, every witness in that building, he grabs her by the throat. He shoves her to the floor. Then he straightens his jacket and walks away laughing. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have possibly imagined, was that the woman he left broken on that cold supermarket floor had already become someone entirely different. Someone connected to power he had never encountered. Someone protected by a man whose name made other dangerous men nervous. By the time he found out, it was already too late. This is not a story about a woman who waited to be rescued. This is a story about a woman who made one phone call, refused to stay broken, and watched an entire empire of cruelty collapse under the weight of its own arrogance. Stay with me, because what happens in this story, chapter by chapter, twist by twist, is going to keep you on the edge of your seat until the very last word. I promise you, you will not see every turn coming. And the ending will stay with you. Before we begin, drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. Your city, your country, wherever you are in the world, I want to know. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because stories like this one are what this channel is built on. Now, let's go back to the beginning. The can of peaches slipped from my fingers before I could catch it. It hit the floor of Save More supermarket with a hollow clang that echoed down the entire aisle, and every head turned. I was 7 months pregnant. My back had been screaming since morning. My ankles looked like 2 small balloons, and the fluorescent lights above me buzzed like they had something personal against me. I bent down slowly, one hand pressed against my belly, trying to reach the can, and that's when I heard it. Seriously, you're still shopping at discount stores? I knew that voice before I even straightened up. I knew it the way you know the sound of a door slamming in a house you used to live in. Cold, familiar, wrong. Derek stood 3 feet away, looking like money he hadn't earned. Fresh haircut, designer jacket, a shopping cart full of things that cost more than my weekly budget. And beside him, draped on his arm like an accessory, was Vanessa. I'd seen her on social media. Influencer, perfectly contoured, already holding her phone up like she was filming a scene she'd been waiting for. Derek, I said his name quietly, just trying to signal that I wanted nothing from him. Please, I just want to finish shopping. He stepped closer instead of backing away. That familiar smirk spread across his face, the one I used to mistake for confidence. You look terrible, Zoe. Whose baby is that even supposed to be? Vanessa giggled, actually giggled. I turned to leave. That was my mistake, turning my back on him in public. Derek's hand shot out and grabbed my collar, yanking me backward so hard my feet slipped on the smooth floor. For one horrifying second, his fingers pressed against my throat, not long, not hard enough to leave marks the cameras would catch, but long enough for me to feel it, long enough for my baby to feel it. I crashed into the chip display. Bags exploded around me. My hip hit the metal shelf edge and pain cracked through my side like lightning. I went down. I lay there on the cold floor of Save More supermarket, 7 months pregnant, surrounded by strangers who did nothing. Vanessa was filming. Derek was straightening his jacket, and security was walking toward me, not him. My phone was in my hand. I don't even remember grabbing it. One name on the screen. One name I had promised myself I would never call again. Jay. I stared at it. The floor was cold beneath me. My baby kicked hard like she was telling me something. I pressed call. Before Jay, there was Derek. And before I explain what Derek took from me, you need to understand what I gave him. 4 years, that's what I gave him. 4 years of paying the rent on an apartment that had his name on the lease while he built his brand as a fitness influencer who never quite broke through. 4 years of cooking, covering, defending, and shrinking myself whenever his insecurities got loud. I worked double shifts at the hospital administration office. I sent money to his mother when she called. I believed him every time he said he was close to the deal, close to the sponsorship, close to becoming the man he kept promising me he would be. When I got pregnant the first time, I was 26. I found out on a Tuesday. I waited until Friday to tell him, wanting to find the right moment. He listened, nodded, and went out that night with his friends. He came home at 3 a.m. smelling like a bar and said, "We'll figure it out." We didn't. I miscarried at 9 weeks, alone in our bathroom while he slept in the next room. He never asked how I was doing afterward. Not once. When I got pregnant again 2 years later, I told him on a Sunday morning over breakfast. He put down his fork, looked at me and said, "Is this really the right time?" I told him I was keeping the baby. He told me I was being selfish. That night, I came home from a grocery run and found my clothes in 2 black bags outside our door. His name was on the lease. He knew exactly what he was doing. I stayed with my sister Carla for 3 weeks before I found my own place. A small apartment with thin walls and a heater that only worked when it felt like it. But it was mine. What Derek never knew, what I never told him, was that 6 months before that pregnancy, I had briefly dated someone else. A quiet, serious Korean businessman named Jay who brought me medicine when I had a cold, who listened when I talked, who once drove 40 minutes in traffic just to sit with me when I was anxious about a medical result. Jay had asked me to stay. He said it simply, without pressure, just honesty. I chose Derek instead because Jay's world felt too large, too serious, too unknown. I was scared. Lying on that supermarket floor, I finally understood the full cost of that fear. Jay picked up on the first ring. He didn't say hello. He said my name, Zoe, the way a person says the name of something they've been careful with. Steady, certain, like he'd been waiting, but not desperately. Just patiently, the way someone waits for weather to change when they already know it will. "Where are you?" he asked. I told him. My voice broke 3 times trying to get through one sentence. I told him about Derek and the collar and the fall and the pain in my side and the baby kicking and the security guard who told me to calm down while Vanessa kept filming. I told him I had nowhere else to go and I hated that I was calling and I was sorry. "Stop," he said. One word, gentle but firm, like a hand on a door that was swinging too fast. "Breathe, tell me if the baby is moving." She was, I told him. "Good, I'm leaving now, don't move. Don't let anyone make you leave that spot." I heard movement in the background, a chair, footsteps, quick Korean spoken by someone nearby, a door. "Jay," I said, I don't know what I'm asking you for." "You're not asking," he said. "I'm deciding there's a difference." 4 minutes later, I counted, a black SUV pulled into the Save More parking lot. The driver, a calm young man in a dark jacket, didn't ask questions. He opened the back door, handed me a folded card, and said Mr. Kang was on his way. On the card, printed in clean letters, was a clinic address 2 miles away, and below it, a single word. Kang. I turned the card over in my hands. Outside the windows, the city moved normally. People loaded bags into cars, children argued over snacks, the world continued without interruption. And I sat in the back of a car I didn't recognize, carrying a baby I had chosen to fight for, heading toward a name I hadn't let myself think about in 2 years. I didn't know yet what that name meant to this city. I was about to find out. The clinic was private and very quiet. The kind of place where the receptionist speaks softly and nobody asks about your insurance before checking if you're okay. A doctor examined me within minutes of arriving, checked the baby, checked my hip, checked my blood pressure, and told me calmly that everything was stable but my pressure was too high and I needed to rest. While I lay on the exam table staring at the ceiling, I did something I hadn't planned. I opened my phone and searched the name on the card. Kang Logistics, Kang Holdings, Kang Community Foundation, that one surprised me. Then a business profile 2 years old describing Jay as a prominent figure in international trade and private investment. Nothing unusual. But then I scrolled further and found a Korean news article, auto-translated and slightly clunky, with a photo that stopped my breath. Jay, younger, sharper-suited, walking out of what looked like a government building. The caption translated roughly as, Kang Jin-young, identified as key figure in Eastern Port Network, questioned by Trade Authority investigators. Eastern Port Network, I read the phrase twice. I looked up from my phone. The clinic was calm. A nurse smiled at me from the doorway. I thought about the man who used to sit across from me at a small kitchen table, asking about my day, refilling my tea without being asked. I thought about how he never raised his voice, how he read 3 books on pregnancy after I told him I'd miscarried once, even though we weren't even serious yet, how his gentleness had always seemed like a choice, not a default. I was beginning to understand it was a choice, and that the alternative was something very different. The doctor returned. "Mr. Kang has arranged for you to stay overnight for monitoring. Everything is taken care of." I looked at the article one more time. Then I put my phone down. Who did I walk away from? I thought. And then, quieter, underneath that, why did I wait this long to call him? My sister Carla called while I was still in the clinic bed, her voice tight with the specific energy she gets when something has gone wrong, and she needs to be the one to tell me. Vanessa had posted the proposal video. Rooftop restaurant, candles, a ring that probably cost more than my car, Derek on one knee with a smile so wide it looked borrowed, Vanessa with her hands over her mouth, crying those perfect influencer tears. The caption read, "He chose me every day and now it's official. I choose him forever." 50,000 likes in 3 hours. "There's more," Carla said, and I could tell she didn't want to say the next part. "Someone found your old Instagram. They're linking it in the comments, saying Derek's crazy pregnant ex is trying to get attention." I closed my eyes. And Mama Lorraine posted. Mama Lorraine was Derek's mother, a tall, sharp-tongued woman who had told me once with a smile that I was too rough around the edges for her son. She had posted a photo of herself with Vanessa, cheek to cheek, champagne glasses raised with the caption, "My daughter-in-law, finally someone worthy." The wedding, Carla told me, was in 6 weeks. I hung up the phone and sat with the silence for a moment. Then I looked at the window. The black SUV was still in the parking lot, still waiting. Something moved inside me. Not the baby this time, though she kicked too, right on cue as if she agreed. Something older. Something that had been curled up and quiet for too long. Derek had put his hands on my throat in a public place. He had stood over me while I lay on a floor and smiled. Vanessa had filmed it for content. And now the world was celebrating their love story while I lay in a clinic bed, blood pressure high, hip bruised, alone. No, not alone. I pressed the call button for the nurse. "Can you tell me when Mr. Kang is expected to arrive?" I asked. She smiled. "He's already here." Jay walked in carrying a paper bag from Hanok Kitchen, the small Korean restaurant I had mentioned once, 18 months ago, in a passing conversation I barely remembered. He remembered. He looked the same, tall, composed, the kind of still that isn't emptiness but control. He was wearing a dark coat and no tie, which somehow made him look more powerful than a suit would have. He set the bag down, pulled up the chair beside my bed, and sat down like he had all the time in the world. We talked, really talked, the first time in 2 years. He asked about my health first, then the baby, then what I needed practically. He didn't perform sympathy. He just listened, and the listening felt like being handed something solid to hold. When I finally asked, "Jay, what exactly do you do?" he didn't look away. "I solve problems," he said, "legally when possible." The last 3 words were careful, deliberate. He was telling me something true and letting me decide what to do with it. I thought about the article, the Eastern Port Network, the investigator's photo. "Are you dangerous?" I asked. He considered the question seriously, which I appreciated. "I have been," he said. "I am choosing something different now. That choice costs more than people expect." I believed him. I don't know exactly why, maybe because a liar would have simply said no. Before he left, he placed a key card on my tray table. "My building, top floor. The unit is empty and it is yours for as long as you need it. No conditions, no obligations." I looked at the card. "Jay, you don't owe me anything, Zoe. You never did." I didn't pick it up while he was in the room, but after he left, I held it for a long time, turned it over once. Then I set it on top of my phone where I'd be sure to see it in the morning. That night, a note was slipped under the door of my apartment. Carla found it when she went to water my plants. It said, "Back off or find out." I took the key card. Vanessa's brand was built on beautiful pictures and the careful appearance of a woman who had everything. But I learned quickly that her real talent wasn't content creation. It was targeted cruelty made to look like confidence. Within 4 days of Derek's proposal, she had posted 3 stories that didn't mention me by name but didn't need to. Some women can't handle watching a man grow. Your chapter ended. That doesn't make his story wrong. Praying for the ones still stuck. Her followers understood the assignment. My old accounts were flooded. A blogger with 200,000 followers posted the Fresh Mart video, Vanessa's edited angle, cut to start after Derek grabbed me, under the headline, "Pregnant woman causes scene at local supermarket." 300,000 views by the next morning. I watched it from Jay's penthouse, sitting on a couch that probably cost more than 6 months of my old rent, wearing a borrowed robe, eating crackers because my stomach was too tight for a real meal. Jay came out of his office and found me watching it. He sat beside me. He didn't say anything immediately. He just watched it too, the edited version, the comments section, the gleeful cruelty of strangers who had no idea what they hadn't seen. Then he took the phone gently from my hand, not to hide it from me, just to stop it. "They made the first move," he said. "Now we document everything, every post, every story, every comment. We document it, certify it, and we do not respond publicly. Not yet." "Why not yet?" I asked. He almost smiled. "Because responding now gives them the narrative. Waiting gives us the evidence." He handed the phone back. Then he said something I hadn't expected. "There are cameras at Fresh Mart, 12 of them. We already have the full footage." I stared at him. "I made some calls," he said simply, and went back to his office. I sat there in the quiet of his penthouse. The city lights spread out below me like a conversation I wasn't part of yet, and I understood for the first time that I had not called Jay for comfort. I had called him into a war. Ms. Song was Jay's attorney. She arrived the next morning in a gray suit and heels, carrying a leather folder that she set on the dining table with the kind of quiet authority that made the room feel like a courtroom. She was in her early 40s, Korean, precise in a way that felt like a second language she had mastered completely. She opened the folder and turned it toward me. The Fresh Mart security footage had been pulled from all 12 cameras, legally certified by a third-party notary, and time-stamped. She walked me through it on her laptop. Camera 7 caught Derek's hand on my collar. Camera 3 showed Vanessa moving toward me for a better filming angle rather than back. Camera 11 showed 2 store employees looking directly at the incident and turning away. Camera 4 showed the security guard, who later told me to calm down, watching the entire thing from 30 feet away. "This supports 3 separate legal actions," Ms. Song said, clicking through her notes. "First, criminal assault charges against Derek Owens. Second, a civil suit for emotional distress and endangerment of an unborn child, also against him. Third, a negligence suit against Savemore for failure to intervene and failure to protect a customer." I looked at the folder. All of this from one incident that was thoroughly recorded. She allowed herself a small, controlled smile. "Mr. Kang has good cameras." She closed one section of the folder and opened another. This section had a different color tab. She slid a single page across the table toward me, and I read it. And then I read it again. "Is this real?" I said. "Verified by 2 independent forensic accountants," Ms. Song said. "We thought you should see it before we proceed." I looked up at her. He was stealing from them the whole time we were together. "Before that too," she said. I sat back in my chair. The page stayed on the table between us, full of numbers and account names and dates that went back further than our relationship, further than I'd imagined. Derek hadn't just been lazy. He hadn't just been selfish. He had been a careful, patient, deliberate thief, and he had used our relationship as cover while he did it. Miss Song watched my face. "What would you like to do?" Derek had been sitting on the board of the Uplift Community Business Fund for 2.5 years. The fund existed to give grants to Black-owned small businesses in our city's startup capital, operating support, the kind of money that meant the difference between a dream staying a dream and becoming something real. The forensic accountant's report showed $340,000 redirected over 22 months. Not taken all at once, that would have been too obvious. Small amounts, routed through a consulting company Derek had registered in a different state, invoiced for strategic advisory services that were never rendered. Clean on the surface, devastating underneath. Ms. Song had also found the text thread. It was between Derek and a lawyer, not Ms. Song's firm, a different one, dated the same week I told Derek I was keeping the baby. The texts were short and businesslike. Derek had asked, plainly, how to structure his assets to ensure a future co-parenting claim couldn't access them. The lawyer had outlined 3 steps. Derek had followed all 3. He had been protecting himself from me. Before I even knew, I needed to protect myself from him. I sat with that for a while. The baby moved, and I put my hand on my belly and just breathed. There was one more page. Ms. Song had located 7 business owners who had applied to the Uplift Fund and received partial or no funding during Derek's time on the board. Their applications had been scored low by a review process Derek influenced. One was a Haitian woman who had applied to expand her hair salon. One was a young man trying to open a recording studio. One was a Black woman architect, just starting out, who had designed her own studio space and never got to build it. 7 people. 7 futures, delayed or derailed. What do you want to do? Ms. Song asked again. This time, the answer came immediately. All of it, I said. Every legal action, every charge, I want to do all of it. Jay, standing near the window, said nothing. But when I glanced over at him, the look on his face, not pride exactly, but something close to respect, stayed with me for the rest of the day. I said yes. Not to a ring. Not to a grand gesture. There was no music or candlelight or audience. It was midnight on a Wednesday, Jay and I alone in his kitchen, me eating the jollof rice he'd had delivered from a West African restaurant nearby, because I'd mentioned once that it was my comfort food. He sat across from me, watching me eat the way he always did, like making sure I was okay was a full-time job he had accepted willingly. I want to be here, he said. Not just for the legal process, for all of it. The baby, what comes after. I want to be here for your whole life, Zoe, if you'll let me. I looked at him across the table. I thought about everything, the miscarriage, the black bags outside the apartment door, the cold Save More floor, the card that said Kang. I thought about all the times I had told myself I didn't deserve something steady, that I was too much or not enough or somewhere in the wrong middle. You scare me a little, I told him honestly. I know, he said. I think that's reasonable. I almost laughed. Yes, I said, I'll let you. He reached across the table and held my hand, and we stayed like that for a long time without saying anything more, because nothing more needed to be said. Then, 3 days later, the knock came. Miss Song called seconds before it arrived. Derek's lawyer had filed a preemptive motion, a custody claim, filed before my daughter was even born, describing me as an emotionally unstable individual currently residing with a person of known criminal interest. It was a threat wrapped in legal language, designed to rattle me, to make me defensive, to put me on the back foot before the real fight began. I read the filing on my phone, standing in Jay's living room, sunlight cutting across the floor. They went after Nara, I said. I don't know why I used her name. I hadn't officially named her yet. It had just been what I called her in my head. But in that moment, it felt right. Jay read the filing over my shoulder. His jaw tightened. Then we go to work, he said. Mama Lorraine called me herself. That surprised me. I hadn't spoken to Derek's mother in over a year, and I had not missed the experience. Her voice on my phone felt like stepping on something in the dark. She didn't raise her voice. She never did. That was her particular skill. She kept everything smooth and pleasant while the threat moved underneath it like water under ice. She said she was reaching out in the spirit of resolution. She said that families should handle their matters privately, without courts and cameras and outside parties, getting involved. She said Derek was willing to offer child support. She named a number that was insultingly low, in exchange for my agreement to drop the legal actions and avoid making any public statements about family matters. "I'm sure you understand," she said, "how complicated things can become for a single mother without the right kind of support system." There it was. Not a suggestion, a warning, dressed in the voice of a woman who had never once looked at me like I belonged. I kept my voice completely even. "I understand what you're saying, Mama Lorraine." "Good," she said, warming slightly. "I knew you were a practical girl." "I'll need to think about it," I said. We hung up. I immediately forwarded the recorded call to Ms. Song. I had started recording all my calls 2 days ago, quietly, legally, as Jay had advised, and then I called Jay. "She threatened me," I said. "I know," he said. "I was listening." I stopped. "What do you mean you were listening?" A pause, not guilty, just measured. "Your phone has a security application. Ms. Song installed it the day you moved in. It mirrors calls to a secure server. I heard everything." I stood in the middle of the living room and processed that. "Is that legal?" I asked. "On your own phone, yes." I exhaled. "We need to talk about boundaries," I said. "Agreed," he said, "after we use the recording." Nara came into the world at 3:47 in the morning, 6 weeks before her due date, in a private maternity suite at St. Catherine's that Jay had arranged with the same quiet efficiency he applied to everything. She was small, 4 pounds, 11 ounces. She had a full head of dark hair and lungs that announced her arrival to the entire floor. The doctor placed her on my chest, and I felt something rearrange itself inside me permanently. Some interior wall that I had been building and reinforcing for years just came down, quietly, like it had been waiting for permission. "She's perfect," I said. My voice sounded strange to me, scraped clean. Jay was beside me. He had driven through a rainstorm after my water broke in the elevator of his building, one hand on the wheel, one hand holding mine, telling me to breathe the whole way there. He had stayed through every contraction and every moment of panic and every time I told him I couldn't do it, which was at least 4 times. Now he looked at Nara with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Not the controlled steadiness, not the careful authority. Something younger and more open, something that looked like wonder. "Can I hold her?" he asked. I nodded. He took her like she was the most important thing he had ever been handed. She quieted almost immediately. What I didn't know, lying in that bed in the warm quiet of that room, was that 2 men had been in the hospital lobby earlier that evening asking which room I was in. The front desk, following a protocol Jay's security team had established with the hospital administration before I even arrived, had given them nothing. Jay had been notified by text during labor. He had made 1 call from the hallway. The men had left within minutes. When he came back, he had been completely calm. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Everything's fine," he said. He sat beside me and watched Nara sleep, and I held on to the moment, not knowing yet how close it had come to being interrupted. The lawsuit became public record on a Tuesday. By Wednesday morning, someone had leaked the filing details to a media blogger with a large following, and by Wednesday afternoon, Derek's name was appearing alongside the words assault and fund fraud in the same sentences across 3 platforms. Uplift Fund, $340,000, $7 businesses. The story spread the way fire spreads when there's been a drought, fast, hungry, finding everything dry. Vanessa went live that evening. I watched it on my phone while nursing Nara. 43 minutes of tears, careful language, and the slow, deliberate construction of herself as a victim. She said she had been deceived, that she hadn't known, that her heart broke for anyone who had been hurt. She did not mention me by name. She did not acknowledge the Fresh Mart video. She let her followers fill in the gaps with sympathy. For about 20 minutes it worked. Then someone in her comment section posted a link. Jay's team had released the full, unedited Fresh Mart footage to a journalist the night before, quietly, with full certification of authenticity. All 12 camera angles, edited into a clean 4-minute video with timestamps. Derek's hand on my collar. Vanessa stepping forward to film. The security guard looking away. Me on the floor. The journalist had posted it that morning. By the time Vanessa went live, it had 1.4 million views. Someone pasted the link directly into Vanessa's livestream chat. She saw it. The whole camera saw her see it. She went very still. 80,000 people watched her face change in real time, watched the performance slip, watched the calculation behind her eyes, watched her reach for something to say and find nothing. She ended the live without speaking, just reached forward and cut the feed. Within the hour, her team posted that she was stepping back to prioritize her mental health. By the next morning, her first sponsor had posted a review of their partnership. By evening, 2 more had followed. Nara slept through all of it, small and warm against my chest, completely unbothered. Ms. Song found them through the Uplift Fund's public grant records. 7 names, 7 applications, 7 stories of what almost was. There was Donna, who had applied to expand her Haitian bakery into a second location after 8 years of building her first. There was Marcus, not my Marcus, a different one, a 24-year-old who had drawn up plans for a recording studio in the neighborhood where he grew up. There was Priya, the architect, who had designed her own workspace down to the fixtures and submitted her application with photographs of the empty building she wanted to lease. Ms. Song arranged a video call. 7 screens, 7 faces, 7 different versions of the same quiet, enduring frustration. I didn't speak first. I listened. Donna said the rejection had come with no feedback, no appeal option, just a form letter. Marcus said he had been told the fund was fully allocated that quarter, and then watched a corporation receive a grant from the same fund 2 weeks later. Priya said she had followed up 4 times and received no responses. They had all continued. Scraped together other funding, taken second jobs, delayed timelines, revised dreams into smaller shapes that fit the spaces they were allowed. But the loss was still there underneath, not bitterness, just the particular weight of knowing something was taken from you deliberately. Toward the end of the call, Donna looked directly into her camera. "We heard what happened to you at that store," she said. "We're glad you're fighting." I had to look away for a moment, not because I was sad, though I was, but because her words landed with a weight I hadn't expected. This had never just been about me. Derek's cruelty had a radius I hadn't fully measured, and I was only now beginning to understand its reach. I looked back at the screen. 7 faces, 7 people who had decided to trust this process. "We're doing this together," I said. "Every single one of us." I found the article myself. Jay hadn't shown it to me, hadn't warned me, and when I brought it to him, his expression told me he had known it was coming. The journalist had published a profile of Jay under the headline, "The Shadow Behind the Save More Crusade." It described him as a controversial figure with long-standing ties to illegal trade networks, and included references to the Eastern Port investigation from 5 years ago, the same one I had found in the translated Korean article on my first night in the clinic. There were no convictions. The article said so quietly in the 11th paragraph, but the damage wasn't in the facts. It was in the framing. I held the phone out to Jay when he walked in. He read it standing up. Then he set the phone on the table and sat down across from me. "Is it true?" I asked. He didn't reach for a comfortable answer. He told me about his father, a man who had built a shipping network in the 1990s by making arrangements that crossed lines that shouldn't be crossed, who had passed the network to Jay at 28, when Jay was too young and too loyal to refuse it. He told me about the years that followed, the years he had spent learning the full shape of what he had inherited, then the years he had spent carefully, expensively, sometimes dangerously dismantling it. Pulling operations into legitimate structures, closing accounts, letting certain relationships expire. "How much is left?" I asked. "Very little," he said. "That's why someone is trying to distract attention toward me now. I am harder to use than I used to be." "Are we in danger?" He met my eyes steadily. "I will not let anything reach you or Nara. That is not a comfort. That is a fact." I believed him. Not blindly. I believed him because I had watched him for weeks now, and everything he had told me had been exactly as true as he said it would be. "Okay," I said. He looked surprised, just slightly. "Okay," he repeated. "You told me the truth when you didn't have to," I said. "That means something." Derek arrived at the civil deposition in a suit that cost more than it should have, with 2 attorneys and an expression of careful control that lasted about 40 minutes. Ms. Song dismantled it methodically. She began with the footage, walked through each camera angle, asked Derek to confirm that the person in the video was him. He confirmed. She asked him to confirm the timestamp. He confirmed. She asked him to describe in his own words what he intended when he reached for my collar. His lawyer objected. Ms. Song moved on without breaking stride. She moved to the text thread, the messages to the other lawyer about asset protection, sent the week I announced I was keeping the baby. Derek's second attorney objected twice. Ms. Song presented the messages as certified evidence. They stayed in the record. She moved to the Uplift Fund. She had the fund's financial records, the forensic accountant's report, the consulting company registration in the other state, and 12 invoices for services that no employee of the fund could verify had ever been rendered. Derek's composure cracked around the 90-minute mark. He interrupted Ms. Song mid-question to say that she was misrepresenting the nature of his role. Ms. Song paused. Let the room be completely silent. "Mr. Owens," she said, "did you, at any point during your tenure on the Uplift Fund board, direct payments to a consulting company in which you held an ownership interest?" His lead attorney leaned forward. They whispered. The attorney requested a 5-minute recess. He didn't come back. Derek's second attorney continued the deposition, visibly less certain than when they had started. By the time they finished, Derek had contradicted himself on 3 separate points, all of them on record. Outside the building afterward, Ms. Song straightened her folder and said simply, "They'll settle. We didn't go after Mama Lorraine. That's important to understand. This wasn't about revenge. It was about stopping a pattern of behavior that had been running unchecked for a long time, and sometimes stopping a pattern means understanding the full shape of it first." Jay's team had been quietly researching Lorraine Owens for weeks, not digging for weapons, mapping for truth. What they found wasn't something she had created. It was something she had benefited from and never disclosed. Her real estate development company had received 3 city contracts over a 9-year period. The councilman who had influenced those contract awards was currently the subject of a federal bribery investigation, unrelated to Lorraine, but overlapping. Lorraine hadn't initiated the arrangement, but she had accepted the contracts, built her reputation on them, and never once raised a question about how they had come to her. Ms. Song presented this to Lorraine's attorneys in a private meeting. She was precise about what she was and was not doing. She was not filing a complaint. She was not alerting federal investigators. She was sharing information that she had come across in the course of an existing legal matter, and she wanted Lorraine's attorneys to understand the full context of the situation their client was navigating. 48 hours later, the custody motion that Derek had filed, the one that called me unstable and referenced Jay as a criminal figure, was formally withdrawn. Mama Lorraine did not call me again. That phone call where she offered me the low number and called me practical, the one she thought was a private negotiation, was included in Ms. Song's files. Certified, time-stamped, available. She knew it was there. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive loudly. Sometimes it just quietly closes every exit until the right door is the only one left. The second release came on a Friday evening. Jay's team gave it to a journalist with a track record of careful, sourced reporting and no relationship with Derek's publicist. The package included a set of direct messages. The first group was between Vanessa and a close friend, sent the evening of the Savemore incident. "Girl, I caught Derek's whole moment on camera. This is going to go so crazy for my page." The second group was older, 3 weeks before the Fresh Mart incident. Vanessa and Derek planning. They had found out where I shopped. They had discussed timing. They had talked about what the video would do for her following and his image, making him look unbothered and successful. The Freshmart incident had not been accidental. They had followed me there. The article went live at 6 p.m. By 9 p.m., the story had been picked up by 4 larger outlets. By midnight, Vanessa's name was trending alongside the word premeditated. Her remaining sponsors began posting statements through the night, careful, formal, the language of brands distancing themselves from damage. One by one. Then her verification badge disappeared. Then her account went private. Derek's team released a statement through his attorneys calling the messages incomplete and taken out of context. It was posted at 2 a.m., always a sign of panic, and responded to immediately with disbelief. Within 12 hours, the statement had 800 likes and 31,000 replies, almost none of them favorable. I read it in the morning over coffee, Nara asleep on my chest, the city quiet outside Jay's windows. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something cleaner than that. The truth had arrived, and it had arrived on its own terms, in its own time, the way Jay had said it would. I put my phone down and watched my daughter sleep. Jay proposed on a Thursday night. There was no reservation, no speech, no audience. We were in the kitchen, takeout containers between us, Nara asleep in the next room, some late-night talk show murmuring from the TV in the background. I was in a hoodie and no makeup, and I had spit up on my left sleeve that I hadn't noticed until halfway through dinner. Jay slid something across the table. A ring. Simple, elegant, a thin gold band with a single dark stone that caught the light quietly rather than announcing itself. I want to make a formal choice, he said. In front of your family and mine, I want it to be real and recorded and lasting. I looked at the ring. I looked at him. You know what people will say, I said. About us, about the difference between our worlds. Yes, he said. And I know what I'll say back, he said. I thought about the woman on the Save More floor. The woman who had been too scared to choose something real because it came in a shape she didn't recognize. I thought about Nara in the next room, 4 months old, learning every day what the world was by watching the people around her. Yes, I said. He put the ring on my finger. We stayed at the kitchen table for another hour, talking about small things in Nara's sleep schedule, a documentary we'd both been meaning to watch, whether the restaurant downstairs had changed their dumpling recipe. Normal things, quiet things. My phone lit up near midnight, an email from Ms. Song. Subject line, they've accepted, full terms. I read it twice, then I showed Jay. He read it, set the phone down, picked up his tea. Good, he said. The settlement terms were these: full child support for Nara, backdated to her birth, to continue until she turned 18. A formal public apology, written, approved by Ms. Song, posted to Derek's own social media platforms, and to remain live for a minimum of 1 year. Complete withdrawal of all custody claims. And $480,000 in combined damages, divided between me and all 7 Uplift Fund victims by a formula Ms. Song had designed to weight the business losses fairly. Donna would get enough to open her second bakery location. The young musician would get his studio. Priya would get her workspace. The others would receive what had been taken from them, plus interest. Vanessa settled separately, her amount undisclosed, 2 days later. She had offered me an NDA as part of her settlement, a standard request asking for my silence about her role in the Freshmart incident. Ms. Song brought it to me with no recommendation either way. Entirely your decision, she said. I thought about it for less than a minute. No, I said. She planned it, people should know that. Ms. Song nodded once, made a note, and moved on. The afternoon the settlement finalized, Donna called me. Her voice was thick, not sad, just full, the way voices get when something heavy has finally been put down. My daughter can open now, she said. We're going to name the second location after my mother. I went to the bathroom and turned on the tap and let myself cry for exactly 4 minutes. Not from sadness, from the specific, exhausting relief of a fight that had needed to be fought finally being over. Then I washed my face, fixed my hair, went back out to where Jay was waiting with Nara. We had a dinner reservation, something normal, something we'd been putting off for weeks. We went. Derek asked for a meeting. Ms. Song told me during a routine call, matter of fact, no pressure in her voice. His request was simple. He wanted to apologize in person. No lawyers speaking for him, no cameras, no conditions. Every part of me wanted to say no. But I said yes, because I needed to close a door that had been standing open for too long, and I needed to close it myself, from the inside, on my own terms. We met in a conference room in Ms. Song's office building. Jay was beside me. Ms. Song was present. 2 members of Jay's security team stood outside the door. Derek arrived alone. He looked like a different person. The tailored suit was gone. He was thinner. His eyes were red-rimmed. He sat down and didn't make a speech. He just looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, I was wrong about everything. There's no explanation that makes it okay." He said it like it hurt. I believe it did. He talked for a few minutes, about his pride, about the insecurities he had taken out on me for years, about what it had meant when I refused to shrink. He looked at Jay at one point and said, quietly, "You showed up the way I never did. I'm glad she has that." Then he asked to see Nara, just once. Not as a father, he said that plainly, said he understood what he had given up, just to know she existed in person. Before I could answer, Jay spoke. "No," he said, one word. No cruelty in it, but no softness either. "You chose who you were going to be the day you filed that custody motion calling her mother unstable. Nara has a father. That role is filled." Derek nodded slowly. He didn't argue. I stood up. "I forgive you," I said. "Not for your sake, for mine, and for hers." I gestured in the direction of the building where Nara was with Carla 6 blocks away. "Don't contact us again." He nodded again. We left him there. I didn't look back. We got married on a Saturday in April, in the garden of Jay's family estate on the edge of the city. It was small, 40 people, white flowers everywhere. Jay had planted them himself in the weeks before the wedding because I mentioned once that white flowers felt like a fresh start. My mother came. We had spent months rebuilding what had broken between us, slow video calls, careful honesty, the gradual work of 2 people deciding that love mattered more than pride. She cried when she saw me in my dress, not politely. Genuinely, with both hands over her mouth, the way people cry when something they were afraid they'd lost turns out to still be there. Carla was my maid of honor. She gave a speech that made everyone laugh, and then cry, and then laugh again. Donna and the other 6 Uplift Fund recipients sent flowers, a joint arrangement, enormous and beautiful, with a handwritten card signed by all 7 of them. Nara wore a white dress that Jay's sister had chosen and was held during the ceremony by Jay's mother, who had warmed to me slowly and genuinely over the months since Nara was born. She held my daughter like a grandmother holds a child, with authority and ease. Jay said his vows first in Korean, then in English, so that everyone present could understand every word. When it was done, when the officiant said the words, and Jay kissed me like I was the only certain thing in an uncertain world, I heard my mother crying behind me and Carla whispering something to Nara that made the baby coo, and Jay's family laughing softly at something in Korean. Outside afterward, a journalist waited, the careful one who had published the truth about Vanessa. I had agreed to one interview. We had discussed the story I wanted told. Her headline, published the following week, read, "She didn't survive, she rebuilt." 6 months after the wedding, the Nara Foundation opened. The name had a double meaning, Nara, my daughter, and the Korean word for nation or country, which Jay had once described to me as meaning not the place you come from, but the home you choose to build. The foundation's board included me, Carla, Donna, Priya, and 4 women we had met through the legal process, women who had faced family court without support, financial abuse without language for it, public humiliation without recourse. We offered 3 things: legal navigation support for women in family court disputes, childcare assistance so mothers could work or pursue education without losing ground, and microgrants for small business recovery, specifically targeting businesses that had experienced financial sabotage by partners or fraudulent funding bodies. The launch event drew 300 people. A city councilwoman spoke. A women's business organization pledged a 2-year partnership. Donna brought pastries from her new second bakery location, and Priya brought architectural renderings of the community center she was designing for us, pro bono. I stood at the podium and looked out at the room, at the faces of women who had come because they had heard that this was a place where their experience would be believed, and I thought about the Save More floor, the cold tile, the exploded chip bags, the security mirror. The woman I had seen in that mirror was not someone I was ashamed of. She was someone who had been carrying too much alone for too long and had finally decided to let someone in. I used to think strength meant surviving alone, I told the room. I've learned that real strength is knowing when to stop surviving and start building. In the back of the room, Jay stood with Nara on his chest, one hand on her back, watching me with the kind of attention that still, even now, made me feel seen. The journalist who had published the unfair profile of Jay ran a correction 8 months after the original article. She had been fed information from a source inside Derek's former legal team. When the settlement became public, and the full scope of Derek's financial crimes was documented in the public record, the source's credibility collapsed along with Derek's case. The journalist, to her credit, reached out to Ms. Song directly, reviewed the evidence she had been denied the first time, and published a full correction with her own sourced reporting on the Kang Syndicate's dissolution process. It was thorough, factual. It described Jay as a figure who inherited a criminal network and has spent the better part of a decade systematically dismantling it through legal restructuring, at significant personal cost. Jay read it at breakfast and said nothing for a moment. Then he showed me something I hadn't expected, the final dissolution papers for the last Kang Syndicate entity, filed 6 weeks prior, processed and confirmed. The last criminal enterprise under the Kang name was legally closed. He held the document for a moment before setting it down. "My father built that out of fear," he said. "Fear that we would never have enough. Fear that the world wouldn't give us what we needed unless we took it." He looked at Nara, asleep in her chair nearby. "I don't want to give her that. I want to give her something different." "You already are," I said. He folded the document carefully and placed it in a drawer. Not as a trophy, more like a closing statement. That evening, I stood in our kitchen making dinner while Nara watched from her seat and Jay sat at the counter reading, and I thought about how ordinary the moment was. How unremarkably, beautifully ordinary. This was the life I had almost not fought for. 2 years after the Save More incident, I walked into a grocery store. A different one, bright, big windows, a bakery section that smelled like cinnamon. I had Nara on my hip and a list in my hand and no anxiety about the card in my wallet. My phone buzzed once Jay, asking if we needed more of the coffee he liked. I typed back yes and put the phone away. I filled the cart. I moved through the aisles without hurrying. I stopped to read a label I was curious about. I let Nara reach for a box of crackers and hold it even though we weren't buying it, because she was happy and there was time. At the checkout, the woman behind me was struggling. Young, alone, a toddler balanced on one hip and a declined card in her hand, her face doing the particular still face of someone trying very hard not to cry in public. I recognized it, not just because I had felt it, because it is a face every woman who has ever stood at a register praying the number clears has worn. I stepped forward and paid for her groceries before she could stop me. She looked at me like I'd done something extraordinary. "Someone chose to show up for me once when I had nothing," I told her. "That's all." She was still thanking me when I walked out. Outside, Jay was parked at the curb. Nara saw him through the glass door and reached forward in my arms, making the specific impatient sound she saved for him. He got out of the car when he saw us, and when he took her from me, she buried her face in his neck immediately, and he looked at me over her head. I stopped for a second on the sidewalk. 2 years, from the floor of a store to this sidewalk. From a woman who believed she deserved whatever she got, to a woman who knew, really knew in her bones, what she was worth. I walked toward them. There was nowhere else I would rather be. And that's where Zoe's story ends. Not with a dramatic final confrontation, not with a speech, not with anyone watching. Just a woman, her daughter, and the man who chose them both, standing in an ordinary parking lot on an ordinary afternoon, exactly where they were supposed to be. If this story reached you, if any part of it felt true to something you've lived or witnessed or feared, then I want to hear from you right now. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Your city, your country, your corner of the world. Tell me which moment hit you hardest. Was it the Save More floor, the midnight proposal, the settlement, the moment Jay said that role is filled? Tell me your honest thoughts on this story. Your real, unfiltered review, what worked for you, what moved you, what you'll be thinking about tomorrow. This channel grows because of your voices, and every comment genuinely matters. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the moment. Hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications, because this is only one story among many. Every week, a new chapter of something real, stories about women who fall and rise, love that arrives in unexpected forms, justice that comes quietly and completely. You do not want to miss what's coming next. Thank you for staying until the very last word. That means everything. Subscribe, comment, come back. The next story is already waiting.